James Brown was in the middle of recording the vocal track that would become his biggest hit when he smelled smoke. Not the faint smell of something burning somewhere else in the building. Thick, acrid smoke pouring through the ventilation system into Studio A at King Records in Cincinnati. The engineer looked up from his board, confused. The band stopped playing mid-song. And then they heard it, the fire alarm screaming through the entire building, followed by someone shouting from the hallway that everyone needed to evacuate immediately. Brown had been chasing this recording for 6 months, had finally captured the perfect take after 18 attempts, and now a fire was about to destroy everything. What he did in the next 12 minutes defied every safety protocol, risked his life and the lives of everyone in that studio, and resulted in one of the most legendary recordings in music history. A track literally forged in fire that you can still hear the smoke and urgency in when you listen closely. It was May 1964 at King Records' main recording facility in Cincinnati, Ohio. King Records was one of the premier R&B labels in America, and their studio was state-of-the-art for the era. 4 separate recording rooms, the latest equipment, soundproofing that cost a fortune, and a reputation for capturing the best soul and funk music being created. James Brown had been working on a new song for half a year. He'd written it, rewritten it, arranged it, rearranged it, brought in different musicians, tried different approaches. The song had a groove that was unlike anything else, a rhythm that was going to change popular music, though nobody knew it yet. It was funkier than funk had been before, tighter than tight, with a bass line that grabbed you and wouldn't let go. But getting it recorded properly was proving nearly impossible. The song required absolute precision from every musician. One person slightly off tempo, and the whole thing fell apart. The vocal had to be delivered with perfect timing, hitting specific beats in ways that felt natural, but were actually carefully calculated. They'd been in the studio for 11 hours that day. Brown's band, some of the best musicians in the business, was exhausted. The engineers were getting punchy from fatigue. But they finally, after 18 complete takes, captured something special. Take 19 was perfect. The band had locked into the groove like magic. Every instrument was exactly where it needed to be. Brown was recording his vocal overdub when the smoke started seeping into the room. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a slight haze in the air that could have been mistaken for cigarette smoke or dust in the ventilation. But within 30 seconds, it got dramatically worse. The engineer, a man named Dennis Wright, who'd been working at King Records for 8 years, noticed it first. He looked up from his mixing board, sniffed the air, and his face went pale. "That's not cigarette smoke," he said. Before anyone could respond, the building's fire alarm exploded into sound. Deafening bells ringing throughout every floor, red emergency lights started flashing, and through the studio door, which was slightly open, they could hear panicking voices in the hallway. "Fire! Everyone out! The building is on fire!" The band members started moving toward the door immediately. They'd been through fire drills before. They knew the protocol. Get out fast. Don't stop for anything. But James Brown stood frozen in the vocal booth, his headphones still on, looking at the recording equipment through the glass that separated him from the control room. Dennis hit the intercom button. "James, we need to evacuate. Now. This is serious." "What about the recording?" Brown's voice came through the speakers. "We'll deal with it later. Right now we need to get out of this building before—" "Where's the fire?" Brown interrupted. "I don't know. Somewhere in the building. Does it matter? We need to leave." "It matters if we have time to save this recording." Dennis stared at him through the glass, not believing what he was hearing. "Are you insane? This is a fire. A real fire. You can hear the alarm. You can see the smoke. We need to evacuate." Brown pulled off his headphones and walked out of the vocal booth into the control room. The smoke was getting thicker by the second. You could taste it in the air now. Acrid, chemical, clearly coming from something burning that shouldn't be burning. "How long to get the master tape secured?" Brown asked. "James, I'm not going to—" "How long? 30 seconds? A minute?" Dennis looked at the tape reels spinning on the machine. Professional recording equipment in 1964 used large reel-to-reel tapes. Getting them off the machine, into protective cases, and ready to transport would take at least a minute if you did it carefully. Maybe 30 seconds if you didn't care about potentially damaging them. "Maybe a minute," Dennis admitted. "Then we have a minute. Get the master tape. I'll get the backup." "This is against every safety regulation that exists. If my boss finds out I stayed in a burning building to save a tape, your boss will thank you when this song sells 1 million copies. Move." Dennis hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then his love for the music they'd created overcame his sense of self-preservation. He started carefully removing the master tape from the recording machine. Brown grabbed the backup tape from the shelf where it was stored. Studio protocol required keeping a backup of everything in case the master got damaged. That backup was sitting on a shelf 20 feet away, and Brown could get to it faster than Dennis could secure the master. The smoke was getting noticeably worse. Not thick enough to obscure vision yet, but definitely thick enough to make breathing uncomfortable. Both men started coughing. The fire alarm continued its relentless screaming, and now they could hear something else. A crackling sound coming from somewhere else in the building. The sound of fire actively burning. "Dennis, how much longer?" Brown called out as he grabbed the backup tape and its protective case. 10 seconds. This has to be done carefully, or we destroy what we're trying to save." "We don't have 10 seconds. The smoke is getting worse." "I'll finish this and follow you out. We leave together, or we don't leave at all." Dennis finally got the master tape off the machine and into its protective aluminum case. "Got it. Let's go." They headed for the door, but as Brown reached for the handle, there was a loud explosion from somewhere in the building. Not close, but not far either. The walls shook. Some ceiling tiles fell, and the lights flickered and went out, leaving them in near darkness lit only by the red emergency lights. "That sounded like an electrical transformer," Dennis said, his voice shaking slightly. "This building is old. If the electrical system is involved, this whole place could go up fast." They opened the studio door and stepped into the hallway. The smoke here was much worse, thick enough that visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet. People were still evacuating. They could hear footsteps and shouting, though they couldn't see anyone through the smoke. "Stay low," Dennis said. "Air is clearer near the floor." They crouched down and started moving toward the nearest exit. The building had 3 exits from this floor: the main stairwell at the front, a secondary stairwell at the back, and an emergency fire escape on the side. The front stairwell was closest, but it was also where the smoke seemed thickest. "Back stairs," Brown decided. "Go." They moved through the hallway, both clutching their tape cases like they were made of gold instead of magnetic recording tape. The smoke got worse with every step. Both men were coughing constantly now, eyes watering, lungs burning. They reached the back stairwell and started descending. The stairwell was concrete and metal, less flammable than the hallways, but it was filling with smoke too. By the time they reached the ground floor, they could barely see their own hands in front of their faces. The exit door was right there, 30 feet away. Safety on the other side. Fresh air, life. But as they reached for the door, Brown stopped. "The session logs," he said. "What?" "The session logs. The documentation of how we recorded this. The microphone positions, the EQ settings, everything we did to make this sound the way it does. If we lose those, we can't reproduce this sound. We can't explain to anyone else how we did it. James, we are not going back into a burning building for paperwork. It's not paperwork. It's the blueprint for how we created something nobody's created before. Without those logs, this recording is unique, and we can't ever recreate it. With them, we can use these techniques on future recordings. We'll recreate the techniques from memory. Memory isn't good enough. You know that. How many studios have you worked in where people said we think we did it this way and spent weeks trying to recapture a sound because nobody documented the process?" Dennis knew he was right. Studio documentation was crucial. But going back into a burning building for it seemed insane. "Where are the logs?" Dennis asked, not believing he was even considering this. "Studio A, filing cabinet next to the mixing board." "That's where we just came from. That's right in the middle of the smoke." "I know, but I also know that sound we captured is something special. Maybe the most special thing either of us will ever be part of creating, and I'm not losing the knowledge of how we did it." They looked at each other. Both knew this was stupid. Both knew they should walk out that door 30 feet away and be grateful they were alive. Both knew that going back was risking their lives for magnetic tape and paper, and both knew they were going to do it anyway. They turned around and headed back up the stairs. The smoke was worse now, substantially worse. They had to crawl on their hands and knees, keeping their faces as close to the floor as possible, where the air was still somewhat breathable. Every breath burned. Every movement was exhausting. They reached the studio. Dennis went straight for the filing cabinet, while Brown checked the tape cases to make sure they hadn't been damaged. The session logs were exactly where they should be. 3 pages of detailed notes about microphone models, positions, preamp settings, everything. "Got them," Dennis said, stuffing the papers inside his shirt. "Now can we please get out of this death trap?" They started back toward the stairs, but the smoke was now so thick they couldn't see anything. They were navigating by memory and touch, feeling along the walls, hoping they were going in the right direction. Brown's lungs were screaming. Every breath was agony. His eyes were watering so badly he couldn't see anything, even if the smoke hadn't been there. He could hear Dennis beside him, coughing continuously. "Keep moving," Brown said, though it came out as barely a whisper through his damaged throat. They reached what they thought was the stairwell, started descending, made it to the ground floor, found the exit door, pushed it open. Fresh air hit them like a physical force. They both collapsed on the concrete outside the building, coughing violently, sucking in clean air, their lungs slowly returning to normal function. Firefighters were arriving. Police were setting up barriers. Other people from the building were gathered in the parking lot, all of them looking shaken, but mostly unhurt. A firefighter ran over to Brown and Dennis. "Are you two okay? Any injuries?" "We're fine," Brown managed to say between coughs. "Just smoke inhalation. You need to get checked by paramedics. Smoke inhalation can be serious." "We will. But first, is anyone else still in the building?" "We're doing a sweep now. Everyone we've talked to says the building was evacuated. You two might have been the last ones out." Brown and Dennis looked at each other. Gone back into a burning building. For tape and paper. "Was it worth it?" Dennis asked. Brown held up the tape cases. "Ask me again when this song goes #1. The fire was contained within 45 minutes. The damage was extensive. 2 complete studios destroyed, significant smoke damage throughout the building, electrical system compromised. But the structure survived, and more importantly, so did everyone who'd been inside. The song Brown had been recording that day was released 6 weeks later. It went to #1 on the R&B charts. It became one of the most influential funk recordings ever made. It's been sampled hundreds of times. Musicians still study it to understand how to create that particular groove. And if you listen very carefully to the final mix, some people swear they can hear James Brown coughing slightly in the background of one verse. A cough that came from breathing smoke while refusing to abandon something he believed was important. Years later, someone asked Brown about that day. "Why did you risk your life for a recording? No song is worth dying for." "You're right," Brown said, "no song is worth dying for. But the principle of not giving up on something you believe in, that might be worth dying for. I'd spent 6 months on that recording, 18 takes to get it right, and I wasn't going to let fire destroy that work. Not when I had a chance to save it." If this story about refusing to abandon your life's work, even in the face of literal fire, moved you, share it with someone who needs to understand the difference between smart caution and giving up on what matters. Subscribe for more stories about artists who understood that great work requires sacrifice. And remember, the things worth creating are worth protecting, even when it's dangerous to do so.